we've zeroed out the capital expenses in all of the budgets. So we've saved you tax money by doing this. That's money you don't have to raise. You've already got it. You can set it aside. We may use it this year. We may use it next year. You may use it 5 years from now. But at least it will be saved, and we won't have to raise new money in taxes. There's a following article that is also going to be, we're proposing to place revenues against expenses for next year. So we're really trying to take care of the taxpayers' money here. And I think these are reasonable expenses, reasonable reserve funds to set aside for these purposes, because there are always going to be costs for keeping these schools going, even though they're nice and they've been renovated pretty recently.
Any other questions? Are you ready for the question? It has been moved and seconded to authorize the Rockingham Town School District to apply the sum of $123,775.65 from the fiscal year 2017 fund balance to create a reserve fund to be used for capital improvements at the Rockingham schools, and authorize the board to expend said funds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion appears to have passed. The motion has passed, and the article has been adopted. Article 3, to see if the Rockingham School District will reassign the sum of $55,572.01 currently remaining in the 16-18 Cherry Street Reserve Fund to create a new reserve fund to be used for capital improvements at the Rockingham schools, and authorize the board to expend said funds. Mr. Moore?
I'd like to move to authorize the town school district to reassign the sum of $55,572.01 currently remaining in the 1618 Cherry Street Reserve Fund to create a new reserve fund to be used for capital improvements at the Rockingham schools, and authorize the board to expend such funds.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Very difficult to understand. Was he speaking into the mic correctly?
I thought I was. I'll try again. I move to authorize the town school district to reassign the sum of $55,572.01 currently remaining in the 1618 Cherry Street Reserve Fund to create a new reserve fund to be used for capital improvements at the Rockingham schools, and authorize the board to expend such funds.
I'll second that.
All right. Any discussion? Mr. Kern?
Having heard this substantial amount of $500,000 in reserve, is this part of those funds? Someone's shaking their head no.
So this,
No.
oh no, this is the 55,000. So this is, a reserve fund was made, was it last year, I believe? For the purchase and renovations on a piece of property on Cherry Hill.
I'm familiar with it. I live there.
So this is money that is left over from that project that was not expended specifically for that project.
I understand. Thank you.
Other Ms. Fowler? Oh, sorry. Catherine, yes.
I'm Kathleen Martin, and my question is, are these articles all going into the same reserve fund, or are they going to be separate reserve funds for different sorts of purposes? It's all going into one fund?
Well, they're separate funds, but they are all assigned to the same purposes, which are for capital reserves. So they're general. They're not for a specific project.
Right, but I mean, we're voting on 3 different articles. Are they all those things are going into one pot that will then be used?
Financially, we keep track of them separately.
Oh, okay. All right.
We
Thank you.
have to, yeah.
Other questions on Article 3?
I'm afraid I'm sorry, I'm confused. Does this reserve fund pertain to the schools again? Or would we just moved on to the fact that it is a reserved fund in the town for whatever needs to be done? Just the schools, okay, sorry about that. This part of the meeting is for the schools.
Do we have any more questions of Article 3? Are you ready for the question? It has been moved and seconded to authorize the Rockingham School District to reassign the sum of $55,572.01 currently remaining in the 1618 Cherry Street Reserve Fund to create a new reserve fund to be used for capital improvements at the Rockingham schools and authorize the board to expend said funds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and the article is passed. Article 4, to see if the Rockingham Town School District will apply the sum of $200,000 from the fiscal year 2017 fund balance to create a reserve fund to offset expenditures in fiscal year 2020 in order to reduce taxes. Ms. Simons?
Yes, thank you. I move to authorize the town school district to apply the sum of $200,000 from fiscal year 2017 fund balance to create a reserve fund to offset expenditures in fiscal year 2020 in order to reduce taxes.
Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
Do we have questions on Article 4? Yes, Mr. Kern. We have a mic for you.
The last word that she said was something about taxes, but I didn't quite catch what her words were.
To offset expenditures in fiscal year 2020 in order to reduce taxes.
Okay, I love that. Thank you.
Any other questions on Article 4?
Hi, I'm Laura Sherbaum. I do have a question. How was it that we came upon these extra funds? Is there anything that's changed this year? Is this usual? I'm not as familiar with the school board budget, so I'm just curious.
This is from fiscal year 2017, so the previous year. The last article, the 55,000, was from 150 that was allocated to build a park, and the rest is just money we've been able to save from trying to spend wisely. So Edie just reminded me we got a lot more in tuition revenue, and we spent a lot less on special ed than we had expected.
Yes, in the middle.
Dwayne Case, 2 questions. Why is it being allocated to FY 2020?
So that we have some money in 2020 to
Oh.
kind of spread it out. You know, I mean, we don't have, as Joe asked earlier, you know, do we have anything specific? And we don't have any big projects, but we had the excess funds and wanted to make sure that each year we had some money set aside to keep.
Okay, so
keep things
on the assumption that, for example,
Well, and on that, there is additional money that's left over that is rolled into the immediate budget that we're about to vote on. So we took the amount that was left over and we split it so that some is being used to reduce this budget, fiscal year 19, and then the remainder we hope to use on the budget the following year.
okay. And do these 3 past articles constitute the total, I forget the word now, fund balance? from the current year.
Right, so 200,000 we allocated as a applied surplus to this current year's budget that you're going to vote on tomorrow. 200,000 we're setting aside for the year after that to try to level taxes off, and then the other reserve fund article was the 123, 775, 65. So it's
And those three articles together total the...
523, 775, and 65 cents.
Okay.
Yeah. I would remind you, I mean, this is nice to have the surplus, but Rockingham also has a pretty large budget, so I know it sounds like a lot of money, and it's a heck of a lot better than having a deficit, but it is not an outlandish surplus either.
Chris, just for clarification, what is the total budget?
That, 9 million, the one you're about to vote on, almost $10 million.
So just to put it in perspective. Are there other questions on Article 4? All right, you ready for the question? It has been moved and seconded to see if the Rockingham Town School District will apply the sum of $200,000 from fiscal year 2017 fund balance to create a reserve fund to offset expenditures in fiscal year 2020 in order to reduce taxes. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and the article is passed. Article 5 is to be voted on by Australian ballot tomorrow, but it is up for discussion this evening. Article 5, shall the voters of the Rockingham Town School District approve the school board to expend $9,776,950.22, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $16,781.30 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 3.09% lower than spending for the current year. And again, this will be voted on tomorrow by Australian ballot. Discussion. Mr. Barnett.
Thank you. I don't have last year's budget in front of me, so I'm not sure what that figure was, but I'm curious. The previous articles, we've talked about almost $500,000 in surplus. Is that consideration being applied, not necessarily the reserve fund, because one of the board members spoke to that, but obviously somebody overestimated our expenses last year. Is that consideration being applied to this budget?
If you don't mind, I'll address that. Sure. So it seems very nice to bring in tuition funds to the middle school when you're bringing in more than you think you might. When you don't, it's not very nice because then you end up with a deficit. So the fact that Rockingham brings tuition funds from other districts like Westminster and Athens and Grafton creates some budgeting uncertainty that's a little bit hard to account for because we're never sure. When we created this budget last fall, we really don't know how many kids are going to enter 7th grade at the middle school. So that's part of what's happened is that our middle school, thanks to Mrs. Bukowski and her folks that work there, are doing a great job, and it's a popular school, and we're getting a lot of tuition students there, but it's also very unpredictable. So that's part of what happens, Monty, with budgeting for that.
So it's safe to say you're budgeting for a worst-case scenario, and then hopefully you get a surplus if everything goes good throughout the year.
We budget for what we think is going to happen. So, for example, we know how many 7th graders are tuitioned into the middle school right now, and we presume they're going to be there for 8th grade. So we count theirs, and then we see, are we getting half of all the possible incoming seventh graders now? Are we getting 3/4? And we try to make an estimate based on kind of what that looks like. So you can see it's kind of it's a guessing game. And then the other thing, I think, as we said, is the principals and Sharon Reynolds and the special ed folks, had fewer expenditures, and so there was some savings on the expense side as well.
Other questions? You're in the dark, but I can see you.
Scott Falzo. Chris Kibbe, I understand you're leaving this year, and we hired a new superintendent. How much of that budget is money allocated to you for consultation and severance?
None of it, really.
You're not getting $30,000 for fees?
If you want to give it to me, Scott, I'll take it.
No, I don't. That's why I'm asking. I heard it earlier. That's why I'm asking. Your answer is no?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
The board has not authorized any sort of consulting contract with Mr. Kibbe.
What about at the WNSU level?
You'd have to ask the SU about that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not aware of any at the WNSU level.
All right, thank you.
We're not here on the union budget. Any other questions on Article 5? Yes, Peter Golick.
Peter Golick, Saxon River. It was made a statement, I think, Rick, you made it, that we spent less on special education. I believe SU conducts the special education in this district. Is that correct? If you look on page 62 of your SU budget, you'll find that you're showing a increase of expenditures this year of $224,000. The other thing I have is I noticed that it seems the special education's always been a bugaboo here in this district. If you look on page 58, you'll find state-placed special education has gone, the money that we get from the state's gone down $214,000, and another special education budget reimbursement line has gone up $245,000. Will those two lines merge somewhere? Is one taken care of, or do we have less state aid? What's the deal with that?
Well, this is the SU budget, but
It trickles through to the rest of the
questions,
districts.
yes. So one of the things that's, you're right about the special ed budget being up for the coming year in the WNSU. Because we have a lot more special ed students this year. However, remember the surplus we talked about from special ed was from last year. Yeah. So you're talking about two separate years. The state-placed students, and I know you know about this, Peter, so let me take a little moment to explain.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's what I wanted you to do, so people understand.
Yeah. So students that are in state custody that are special ed students that whose parents, biological parents, live outside of our district but are placed inside of our district, we receive money from the state for their special ed costs. However, if one of their parents happens to live within our district, we don't receive special ed 100% reimbursement for special ed. And increasingly, that's what DCF is trying to do to reduce the state cost, and it puts it back on the locals. Okay, so that's exactly what's kind of happening with that piece. I don't think we have a lot. There are plenty of state-placed students, as people know. There's been a lot of press about that.
One more question, and I'll sit down. I noticed the that the health insurance cost on both the SU budget and the Rockingham budget went down, the health insurance lines. Is there a reason for that? Was it a new plan or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is kind of a sore subject, but the VHI, the Vermont Education Health Initiative, which is the organization that works with Blue Cross Blue Shield on our health insurance plans, discontinued our old plans and created new ones that are HRA, health reimbursement accounts, or in a few cases, health savings accounts. The plans are much less expensive, so we are realizing a savings in that kind of across the board. We have yet to kind of see how that's all going to work out. And I think as we start to see figures over the next couple of years and how much of the the HRA, the health reimbursement accounts, are used will be kind of telling. But the premiums are much cheaper than the insurance plans that, for instance, when you were on the board, Peter, you saw.
Yeah, you mentioned reimbursement account. I'll go there next. The simple reason that I noticed with interest that the reimbursement health line has gone up almost half of what the insurance rates went down. An example was if a certain line went down $20,000, the reimbursement line went up to $10,000. It seems strange. Could you explain that?
Maybe.
No, it's fun.
Yeah. The way HRAs work is that the employees have a deductible that they need to meet, an out-of-pocket maximum, if you will. And there's a portion that is the employee's responsibility, and then the districts, through the union negotiations, have agreed to a chunk as well. And that's the line you see in there, the HRA line. What we don't quite know yet is exactly how much of that will actually be hit and used. We're hoping not all of that. But that is the part that potentially the district could be liable for. But as I say, a year from now, maybe you'll have a little history behind it, so you'll kind of see how that's starting to work out, I think.
That's the shortest explanation of health insurance I've ever heard. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, oh, I know. I deal with it all the time. Do we have any other questions on Article 5? Mr. Carn, hold on a minute, Ron. Let's get you a mic. Let's get you a mic.
Article 5, is it specifically questioning special ed?
No, Article 5 is on the entire budget.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Wright.
Hi, I just wondered if someone could speak a little bit at the table about the new food program, which is going to begin this year in this new year budget, which is a significant increase in our in the annual school budget, but should have a significant impact on our students.
Yeah, the food service, cafe services, who our food service has been through for a while, our contract was up and they were no longer interested in a break-even contract, which meant that they would provide services as long as they sold enough food to break even, which they apparently were no longer doing. They had actually approached us to pay part of their manager's salary for the person managing it. Fortunately, I believe that it was someone from the state that stepped in and said, you can't do that. So they had to kind of eat that. And this was across the district, so at the SU, we talked quite a bit about it and felt that maybe it was time to bring food services back into the schools. Rockingham's portion, if you look at, which pages, I changed my card and now I can't find which page it's on. It's between lines 61 and 62. It's $51,927.50 is going to be Rockingham's portion of getting this food service up and running this year, where we will be hiring people and to run the program, to cook the food, and to provide food to all the schools. It's kind of a new business venture, so we're hoping that in the future we can drive that down. We're modeling it based on what Westminster has been doing, and they were doing a pretty good job. They were selling lots of lunches. Teachers were actually buying the lunches and taking dinners home, and the food is really good. You know, as a student, parent of a student in the middle school, I'm sorry, Ms. Bukowski, but I want to take lunch, Dad, because I'm not eating the stuff they serve there. So I'm feeling really good about this, and it is it is an add. It's $51,000 to our budget. We don't know what that would look like had we tried to contract with someone else. It could have been a little less. It could have been a lot more. But since it was not going to be a break-even contract anymore, the decision was made to move ahead and try to provide better food and have better control over the food that's being provided for the kids.
But
I hope that helps.
I would add on that part about control, a large part of the discussion, especially coming out of the experience Westminster has had, was about control over sourcing and being able to direct the purchasing for the food program towards as many local sources as possible, so that we're keeping the economics here in our community as much as we can.
Did that answer your question, Deb? Okay. Joe, Mr. Brissett?
Yeah, I had two questions. One was on health insurance for staff, what that deductible is now, and second, a little bit more about the food program, because you say Westminster is running their own, but we're partnering or being under the SU system, kind of like we do with transportation now. So is Westminster now going to be absorbed under this whole thing as well? So they're going to be kind of like the leadership role to help get this off the ground. I think it's great. I spent a couple of months working with the previous contractor, and it was crap. So this is great news. Yeah, so thank you.
So yes, Westminster, as far as the food service goes, Westminster is kind of the model, and it's all going to be under one umbrella. I believe the gentleman who's been running the Westminster food is very involved in helping create the program, but it will be district-wide, and similar to busing and special ed, it's kind of being spearheaded at the SU to kind of create that equity amongst all the schools. Our own little mini version of Act 46.
Any further discussion on Article 5?
And I didn't quite understand your insurance question. I'm sorry.
The new plan, teachers have to pay out of pocket. They have to meet a deductible before they start getting their plan kicks in. And what's the deductible? I just wanted to know what that was.
It depends. It's complicated. It depends on which
plan you go
plan
for.
they have. There are now an array of four different plans.
Four different plans,
and
okay.
four different kind of options of being in them. So
Well, that's
happy
kinda
to
new too,
provide that
isn't it?
information to folks if they want to stop up. But
Because the old days, I mean, they just got a flat plan, right?
Right.
And now they got a.
Right. There is also still a premium share for teachers, which is 20%. So.
All right, thanks, and thank you.
And this new system is like fairly complex and was in flux during the whole time we were in negotiations, and I don't remember how many tens of pushing hundreds of hours we spent discussing this with the teachers, trying to like get everyone to understand the same thing.
Thank you.
Other questions on Article 5? Mr. Kern? Sure, Ron.
Thank you. My name is Ronald Kern, for those of you that don't know me. I've lived on School Street for 18 years now, and I have been abutting neighbors of our dear friend Michael Hardy. I greatly will miss him. My question comes back to special ed, and I have always felt over years that the state has inordinately dumped a lot of special ed students in our laps to our detriment. It has cost us extra money. It has caused other problems, since special ed students are not the easiest to behave, for lack of a better word. And I would like to know numbers. I just looked in this school budget book, and there are 2 pages devoted to special aid, none of which addresses amounts. And I'm hoping that the board here could give us some idea. This gentleman here, I'm sorry, I'm very bad with names.
All right, address it to me and I'll relay that to.
Okay.
You want to know how much we spend on special ed?
Yeah, but he made a statement early in his speech that it costs us. It costs us. And that's all I have to say, no more.
Do you have the question in mind, Mr. Kibbe? I think if I'm understanding Ron correctly, do we have an overall figure of the expense we put into special ed without regard to reimbursement? Or is that a figure that can't be separated out?
Well, it is part of the SU budget. It's not all in one place.
Okay.
But it is in your book. And I beg your pardon? Well, was Mr. Kern asking about the total special ed cost, or was he asking about what Rockingham's share?
Rockingham.
Okay.
We're only here to address Rockingham
Sorry.
tonight.
Okay.
It's right here.
Yeah. Yeah. Special ed, okay. Yeah, so page 30, line 6, there's an assessment for special ed. That's up $77,943. The next section is essential early ed. That's also special ed, but that's for very young students. That's up $34,321. So special ed is the biggest cost driver in the WNESU budget for this coming year.
Okay.
The food service is in there, but it has offsetting revenues. So.
Okay. Does that help clarify, Ron?
I did.
He did.
So look at line 6 on line 30.
Page 30.
That's one total. That's Rockingham's assessment. And then the next section of lines 7 through 14, are totaled below that.
So can you add those two numbers together in your head, Chris?
$1,177,677. and some change.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's an issue that can be taken up at several levels, Ron. Do we have any other questions on Article 5? All right, and again, this is to be on the Australian ballot during the day-long voting tomorrow. The polls will be open from 9 to 7. If you have an issue with any of these, with any of the Australian ballot items, that's the time to make yourself known.
So I would like to point out that if you look at this, our budget increase for the town of Rockingham is only $4,559.72 this year. So we've got an increase of 5/100% to our budget, with a drop of about a little over 4 cents to the tax rate. And depending on what the state decides to do, there's a possibility that could even drop a little bit more. So we felt pretty good about this budget this year and have worked very hard on it. And as Ms. Wright, who sat in on some of the SU budgets, says, it's a complicated thing to work through. So I appreciate everyone's patience and participation tonight.
All right. Ron, I've given you 3 opportunities. We're going to move on to the next article. Well, in that case, you may.
I applaud the board. I think you've done a wonderful job on putting this budget together, and it's not an improvement, as you've been also used to. Thank you.
And if one more, Joe had asked about capital reserve earlier, and so there still is a capital reserve fund existing of $148,000 that we currently have.
All right, Article 6. To see if the Rockingham Town School District will vote to pay its district officers compensation in the amounts of chair, $700, board members, $600, and treasurer, $400. Do we have a motion?
I move to authorize the town school district to pay the district officers compensation in the amount of board chair $700, board members $600, and treasurer $400.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion. Hearing none, are you ready for the question? And it's been moved, seconded to see if the Rockingham Town School District will vote to pay its district officers compensation in the amounts of chair, $700, board members, $600, and treasurer, $400. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 6. All right, we now come to the only non-financial article. Under this article, no funds may be expended, but other than that, it is open to matters that are germane to this meeting. Article 7, to transact any other proper business to be brought before the town school district meeting. Does anyone wish to? Ms. Luring. We'll get you a microphone.
I'm Louise Luring from Rockingham and Saxons River. I'd like to make a motion to recognize Chris Kibbe for his many years of education in Rockingham, first as a student, then as a teacher, a principal, and superintendent. And every time I turn on Channel 10, Chris is at another school board meeting. I don't know how he does it, many long nights, and I would like to ask us to appreciate that.
I don't think we need a second to that. I think we can adopt that by acclamation. All in favor? And the moderator declares that to be a unanimous vote, so we're not going to ask for any opposed. So well done, Chris. Do we have other business? Yes, Mr. Brissett.
Yeah, just a snapshot on the horizon coming out of Montpelier as far as reimbursements, block grants. What's it looking like, just from what you've heard so far, with all that's happening? Thank you. And thank you, Chris.
Chris
Oh,
is
thank you.
retiring for a reason.
Before he goes, one last speech from Chris.
Montpelier, now that's different. So, there are no less than 3 different legislative initiatives going forward that all are significant for education right now. One was a restructuring of how the education fund would be funded, and the initial proposal was to fund much more of it through an income tax base and much less of it through property taxes. That was set aside, and they also said we won't do anything with this year's taxes or change anything for this year, because those of us in the field had said, for goodness sakes, we're going to town meeting in a couple of weeks, and how can we tell voters what their tax rates are going to be? So that was set aside, and then only a few days ago, another bill was proposed, and this one is talking about a surcharge, an income tax surcharge, and some of the other components as well. And none of it, in my view, is less complicated than what we have now. In fact, I think it's actually could be more. So that's one piece. I don't know what's going to happen to that. Piece number 2 has to do with special ed funding. That may very well pass this year. They're working towards, by I think it's 2025, being entirely in a block grant system of special ed funding. The first few years of that are actually going to be based on districts' current expenditures in special ed, which that's a good thing, because we happen here to be a high-spending special ed district because we have plenty of affordable housing and we have lots of special ed students. I always quip that when people lose their housing, they don't move to Landgrove or Dover. They move to where there's affordable housing. So there is some hope that higher spending districts will receive higher payments, that there's some recognition of that. How that actually works out, we'll see. Bill number 3 has to do with Act 166, the early ed bill. That was the bill that was passed a couple of years ago to expand the tuition payments for 3- and 4-year-olds that are in private programs. That bill was kind of a mess, so this new iteration was proposed to try to clean up some of the pieces of it. I recently testified to the House Ed Committee and pointed out to them that they had just increased taxes statewide by about 3 or 4 cents, because this bill took away our equalized pupils that we're counting as, we're paying tuition for. Now, allegedly that's been fixed, but I have to read the bill to have it proved to me. Senator Balint and I were talking about this on Saturday, and so I hope that indeed that was fixed, but again, it's 3 pretty significant pieces of education legislation going on right now. It's a lot to keep track of.
Any other business to discuss under this article? Yes.
Flo Levin, Saxton's River. I just wanted to make sure that we recognize Sharon Reynolds as well, the Director of Student Support Services, who's also retiring. And all of this talk about special ed, there's another really challenging, thankless, demanding job. And though Sharon is not a resident of our town, she has been supporting us and supporting the students here for a really long time. And I just think we'd be remiss without recognizing her.
I'd like to add something about Ms. Reynolds. As I learned this past year, my first year, my 1 year here on the school board, if you look at the trends over the past 10 years or even further back, all time that Ms. Reynolds has been here, she has, well, the trends are that we're picking up kids when they're younger and easier to provide services for, so that by the time they're older and further into the schools, they are less of a cost. They're less. They need less services, and Ms. Reynolds has really been the one in the district pushing that and making that happen. I'm sure it was a Herculean task that should be recognized as well.
Thank you. Any other business under Article 7? In that case, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Could I have just 1 second?
Oh, you may.
Sorry
about that, Rick.
So, just so everyone knows that, you know, I've heard mention of thankless jobs, and the board is a kind of a thankless job, and Chris's job is kind of a thankless job, but we really need, like, you folks to get involved and help. The school budget is about 2/3 of your tax rate, I believe. This year, we have 3 open seats on the school board with no candidates running. We have 1 person who stepped up and is willing to be a write-in candidate. And I've been on this board for about 5 years now, 6, however long, about the same amount of time Joe has been off. And I'm just kind of amazed at how little community involvement there seems to be. I mean, no one comes to our board meetings. There's a few people do now and then, but it's surprising to me. It's such a big budget, and I understand that we don't have a lot of control over a lot of it, but I would really like to see more of the community get involved in this and like help us move this forward. And I would like to personally thank Chris from myself and from the board. You know, he's been a great mentor. I don't think that any superintendent that we hire is going to put as much heart and soul as Chris has done in this job. As Louise pointed out, he grew up here. When we were going through the hiring process, I was aware that, we're not going to get a superintendent who knows that we can't send the bus out over Atchison Hollow Road because they just ain't going to make it the way that, that's the kind of detail that Chris knows about this community and the schools. And we are going to be at a loss for that, like, history and knowledge of the community. So thanks, Chris.
Now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, all in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock at the Masonic Temple to vote by Australian ballot on Article 6. Town portion of the annual meeting. So take your seats, finish your conversations, turn off your cell phones, and we're going to do some business. And I went over the grounds and rules of engagement, so to speak, at the beginning of the school meeting, so I'm not going to repeat all those. Just a reminder to turn off your cell phones and pagers. Wait for the microphone when you wish to speak. Identify yourself, if you will. Most of you I recognize, even if I can't remember who you are. We'll get the microphone to you so you can be heard as well. I know everybody thinks they have a loud voice, but it's a big room, and we want to make sure your remarks are heard by everybody. We have a procedural issue I'm going to deal with before we get into the substance of the meeting. It'll come up again in the course of the meeting, but I'm going to address it before we get to that point. Your select board is seated over here in the front of the hall. Going down, we have Town Clerk Kathleen Needhawk, Municipal Manager Shane O'Keefe, Board Chair Susan Hammond, Board Member Stefan Golick, Board Member Gaetano Pudignano, Board Member Andy Bernardo, and to my far left, Board Member Cass Wright. Direct your questions to me during the course of the evening. I will redirect them to the manager or one of the board members for a response when appropriate. When we talk about open for debate, that's really not the proper term. We're here for discussion on the articles as we go through them. There's a lot of articles here tonight. Some will require more discussion than others, I'm sure. But we'll get through it. And for those of you who heard my remarks at the beginning of the school meeting, I'm Ray Masuko. I've been appointed by the Select Board to be the moderator pro tem for this evening, and my term will come to a close tomorrow at 7 o'clock. So I have a very short term. But I'm standing in for our longtime 18-year moderator, Michael Hardy, and I would give anything to have him be standing in my place tonight. So, the legal voters of the town of Rockingham and the town of Rockingham School District, which we have just taken care of, are meeting here at the Town Hall Auditorium Monday, March 15th at 7 p.m. to act upon all matters which may be voted upon by acclamation and not otherwise to be voted on by Australian ballot, and then to adjourn to the Masonic Temple at 61 Westminster Street in the town of Rockingham at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, March 6th to vote by Australian ballot. The warning says on Articles 1, 2, and 3. That is incorrect, and that is going to cause us to pass over one article tonight unless the body chooses to do otherwise. And if you do that, I will explain the consequences of taking up an article that was improperly warned. But we're going to start off with Article 1. Article 1 is not to be voted on tonight. That's an Australian ballot item to be voted on tomorrow between the hours of 9 and 7. The ballots are available for you to take a look at. Please take a look at those before you get to the ballot booth, so you have some idea of who's running and who you choose to place your votes for. Article 2. Article 2 was incorrectly specified as being voted on by Australian ballot in the heading of the warning. That is incorrect. We do not take up the town reports by Australian ballot. That is a function of this evening's meeting. So I have had a couple of choices, and I have been on the phone with the Secretary of State and also with Town Council Steve Ancuda. The consensus was that there's no harm and no foul. Even though the warning heading indicated it was by Australian ballot, there's no way we can discuss those reports during the meeting tomorrow. So, absent any objections, I am going to consider that the warning heading, although incorrect, is not going to affect our ability to discuss those reports here tonight. Hearing no objection, do we have a mover of Article 2?
I move that we receive and act upon the reports of the town officers for the past year.
Do we have a second? All right. It has been moved and seconded to receive and act upon the reports of the town officers for the past year. Do we have anybody who wishes to discuss the town reports? Are you ready for the vote? All in favor, and I will restate the motion. To accept and act upon the reports of the town officers for the past year. All in favor? Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 2. Article 3, and I'm going to read the article, and then I'm going to explain what we're not going to do. Article 3, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham authorize the Select Board to appoint the town clerk as provided in 17 Vermont Statutes Annotated, Section 2651E. By Vermont state statutes, this can only be taken up at this meeting. And because the warning heading incorrectly stated that Article 3 would be taken up by Australian ballot, the consensus of the Secretary of State, Town Council, and myself is that that is misleading and confusing. So we have a number of options. The recommendation is that we pass over this article. If we choose not to pass over this article, and you can do so by suspending the rules and a 2/3 majority decide to take up the article here this evening. If you do that and the article passes, we will then have to call a special meeting in order to validate the vote which is taken here tonight. If you choose to pass over the article, you can also choose to have a later special election on that one article, or you can choose to wait until the next special or annual meeting to place on a warning for a properly warned meeting. And again, the recommendation is And the ruling of the moderator is that we will pass over Article 3. Mr. Monty. Sorry. All right. Motion's been made to pass over Article 3. Do we have a second? All right. Do you wish any further discussion? Yes, Monty. Mr. Barnett.
Actually, I think a little bit of discussion is appropriate. I'm not sure what is driving this article. Our town clerk has been voted on by the people since the beginning of time. I don't know if the board or anybody else could speak to that. I think it would be helpful to give the board direction of whether they should put this article on a future ballot or not. My feeling is they should not.
All right, does anybody on the select board wish to address the thinking behind putting Article 3 on this year's warning? Ms. DiBernardo?
There was a bill passed or introduced last year by Representative Marcotta Coventry, and it deals with this issue, should the town clerk be appointed or elected, because there were a few issues in some, especially in Coventry, in some other communities. Apparently you cannot get rid of an elected official, so they felt this would give us the option to do so.
But we just also want to, it has no reflection on our current town clerk whatsoever. It's just that with seeing news reports across the state, including what happened in Putney, it was something we wanted to put in front of the voters to have this discussion. And that's why we put it on for the warning. But
Do I see another hand wishing to speak on Article 3 as to whether or not to pass over? Yes, Ms. Roth.
There's an old saying, first of all, this isn't Coventry, and second of all, if it ain't broke, leave it alone.
All right. I think I saw another hand. Ms. Wright.
So passing over this article means what? Please explain what happened.
Passing over the article means that if you wish to take it up at a later date, it would be off the agenda for this evening.
For this evening.
Yeah.
So then we go on to next year if they would to put it back on again, if.
It could be put on next year. If we have a special meeting called between now and next year, it could be put on that morning. So you have a lot, as I said, a number of options. If you do pass it, if you defeat this motion and choose to act on it tonight, you will then have to have a second special meeting in order to validate tonight's vote.
Okay.
So
we would have to vote on Mr. Barnett's.
we do once the discussion is complete.
Okay.
So any further discussion on the motion to pass over Article 3? Yes. Mr. DeRusha.
Thanks very much. I agree with Monty. I have concerns over removing the town clerk from elected to appointed. The town clerk's functions, the chief function that requires not only that she be squeaky clean, but perceived and understood to be impartial, is elections. She's a chief elections official. You don't want to throw all this out the window, and we won't talk about the other functions. For me, the elections issue is major, and the town clerk needs to be accountable directly to the people. And I'm not meaning this the way it's going to come out, but we have had an historical instability in our management in the community. I don't want to see this go that way. Thank you.
Any further discussion on passing over Article 3? Where? Oh, yes, Peter. Ellen. Sorry.
I'm in favor of passing over this, but I think if the board is going to even consider putting this back on the ballot next year, that there should be some prior discussions. This year, it didn't appear to be any discussion until it appeared in a draft warning notice for this meeting at one meeting. And that's all. There was no discussion, it appears, at any meeting. So I would ask, if you're going to do it again, at least have some meetings ahead of time so that the public can participate and know what's going on. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak on the passing over of Article 3? All right, are you ready for the question? The motion has been made and seconded to pass over Article 3, which states, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham authorize the select board to appoint the town clerk as provided in 17 VSA, section 2651E. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have elected to pass over Article 3. Article 4.
Mr. Moderator, I move, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham authorize the select board to appoint the town treasurer as provided in 17 VSA 2651F.
All right, do we have a second? All right, it has been moved and seconded to vote on whether the voters of the town of Rockingham shall authorize the select board to appoint the town treasurer as provided in 17 VSA section 2651F. We are open for discussion. Ms. Wright.
This article, just like Article 3, is one that requires complete separation from municipality as far as the ability to take action. There is no controls in place if this is not an elected position, but an appointed one.
Further discussion on Article 4? Yes.
I agree that this is a complex issue with pros and cons on both sides and needs considerable thought and discussion, and I would encourage the select board to schedule informational meetings if this is a course that they really wish to pursue and engage the public as a whole in discussion of the pros and cons of voted versus appointed positions. Thank you.
Further discussion on Article 4? Are you ready for the question? It has been moved and seconded to have the voters of the town of Rockingham authorize the select board to appoint the town treasurer as provided in 17 VSA, section 2651F. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say no. No. The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it, and you have defeated Article 4. Article 5. Shall the voters of the town of Rockingham authorize the select board and treasurer to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of tax collection or payment of money due the town from the state of Vermont for highway or other purposes, or payment to the town from federal funds? Mr. Golick.
Mr. Moderator, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham authorize the select board and treasurer to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of tax collection or payment of money due the town from the state of Vermont for highway or other purposes, or payment to the town from federal funds?
Do we have a second? All right. It has been moved and seconded to have the voters of the town of Rockingham authorize the select board and treasurer to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of tax collection or payment of money due the town from the state of Vermont for highway or other purposes, or payment to the town from federal funds. Discussion. All right, you ready for the question? All in favor of having the voters of the town of Rockingham authorize the select board and treasurer to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of tax collection or payment of money due from the town to the town from the state of Vermont for highway or other purposes, or payment to the town from federal funds, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed Article 5. Article 6. Shall the voters of the town of Rockingham authorize the select board to seek out and or accept funds available from non-property tax revenue sources and to spend those funds in appropriate ways after required public input? Mr. Pudignano.
Shall the voters of the town of Rockingham authorize the select board to seek out and/or accept funds available from non-property tax revenue sources and to spend those funds in appropriate ways after required public input?
Do we have a second? All right. Discussion. This is essentially another housekeeping motion. Ready for the question? All right, it's been moved and seconded to have the voters of the town of Rockingham authorize the select board to seek out and/or accept funds available from non-property tax revenue sources and to spend those funds in appropriate ways after required public input. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 6. Article 7. Shall the voters of the town of Rockingham raise and appropriate the sum of $5,413,141 to pay the indebtedness of the town, repair and maintain highways, and pay all other general and regular expenses of the town beginning July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2019, with $4,487,846 to be raised by taxes. Ms. Hammond.
Mr. Moderator, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham raise and appropriate the sum of $5,413,141 to pay the indebtedness of the town, repair and maintain highways, and pay all other general and regular expenses of the town beginning July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019, with $4,487,846 to be raised by taxes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Discussion. All right, Mr. Falzo.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to make a motion that we reduce the budget by $300,000.
All right, under Robert's Rules of Orders, we have an amendment to the main motion. It has been made and seconded to reduce the budget by the amount of $300,000, Scott? Yes. All right, so we will now take up discussion on the amendment to the main motion. Mr. Falzo, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
Looking at the budget here, I see where they allocated $80,000 for another engineer. I think that could be cut out of the budget. And I also see the insurance incentive is $56,300. How much does each employee get for an insurance incentive if they don't take insurance? I know the school only gets $500.
Yeah, I believe it's 50% of the premium that they normally would, the town normally would pay.
So that could be what, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000?
And some.
And then some. All right, well, to start out with, there's $136,300.
The issue, though, is if it cuts in half the amount that the town would normally pay. So say the premium is $20,000, and someone is entitled to that, they can choose to take $10,000 instead. So it's an automatic savings.
Well, it's offered as a benefit. They're not entitled to anything other than the benefit, correct?
If they're over a certain number of hours per week, they're a full-time employee. They're entitled to benefits, which would include health insurance. And so again, if the health insurance, like I said, is that benefit is $20,000, and they choose to take the money instead, provided, of course, they have insurance through a spouse or some other source.
Correct.
Then it's half the price to the town, so it's a winner, frankly.
All right, well, in your book it is, not mine.
Further discussion on the amendment to reduce the budget by $300,000. Mr. Barnett.
Thank you. First, I'd like to come from a position of somebody who has served as select board member for 16 years, served as chair for 10. I have helped prepare 16 budgets, one of those without the help of a town manager. We didn't have one for 1 year. having prepared that many budgets, I honestly can't see where you would find $300,000, but I think there's no question that Mr. Falzo is right. When you look at the proposed increase this year, it includes a position that does not exist. It did exist years ago, and it was eliminated mostly because of the cost. And I think the board at that time, rightly so, probably stopped seeing the true value in that position. Now, I think there's no question a town engineer is beneficial, but I equate it to your own budget. There's needs and there's wants. Okay, you want to put a new deck on the back of your house, but you really need to put a roof on. And I think that's what this is. This is not a position that we truly need. Yes, it would be beneficial. So having said that, I would like to offer a friendly amendment if the moderator will allow.
You can amend an amendment to the original motion one time.
Okay. I would like to amend that to a $100,000 reduction, which is pretty much the total price of this new position. If that passes, it will result in basically no tax increase for the town this year. And if you want me to just keep talking to the amendment, it will result in no tax increase on the municipal side. I think when you pair that to what we heard from the school, where their tax rate's going down 4 cents, I think that's pretty good. So that's basically, you know, you can expect almost the same tax bill next year. And if I can get a second to that amendment.
Do we have a second to the amendment to the amendment? All right. Further discussion on the amendment to the amendment.
Can I speak to that? Can I speak to
Oh,
that?
yes, Susan, sorry. I didn't know where that was coming from.
Yeah. I would have to say that, I mean, we really considered this a lot. I mean, we had budget meetings for several months, and we went through our budget line by line to cut as much as we could. We looked at 5 years of expenses to make sure we weren't over budgeted in places. And when it came to this Public Works Director, we decided to put this forward because we are losing actually money that could be working to help our roads and our sidewalks and our culverts being replaced. Not having someone in a Public Works Director position who can chase after grant funding. We have to hire out, particularly in the next several years, we have everyone who's in this town, one of the first things they complain about are the roads and the sidewalks. And if you don't have someone in that position who is able to plan for the next 5 years of what we need to do to get to the point where our roads and our sidewalks are up to the standard where we all agree are good for the town, it's not going to get done. I mean, in addition, other money that was put into the budget this year was money for paving, extra paving money, extra sidewalk money, gravel crushing money that we need. If you eliminate that position, you're also going to be eliminating, I think, a lot of the work that needs to be done on the roads, because we don't have someone who can be that Public Works Director to get that done.
Ms. DiBernardo?
The estimate engineering studies, the cost for the projects we have coming up is around $50,000. So when you look at that, you know, I think we're actually going to be saving money, and I was on the board with Mr. Lamont Barnett for a number of years, where the board was very proud to level fund, not raise taxes. And when that happened, you didn't do sidewalks, you didn't do roads, and it's catching up to us now. There's a lot of projects that needs to be done. And I remember being on the board with one selectman one time who didn't support the rec center. He said there's enough for kids to do in this community. And so there's a lot of things that we need to do to catch up. And going forward, I do think we need a Public Works Director, just so we can have someone who's knowledgeable, who can do the engineering studies in-house, which is actually cheaper than going out. So, and I think going forward, and then I understand the village trustees didn't want to pay for half of this, but when they do need an engineer, they can contract with the town. So I believe that this could almost be a wash.
Mr. Golick?
I agree with Monty. 9 years ago now, I've been off the board for a year, but 8 years ago was my first year on the board, and the board voted at that time 3-2 to eliminate that position. Since that time, we haven't had that position. We have been able to obtain all the grants that we applied for, except for 2 that I can recall. One was the year that the state did not fund the paving program. We applied for $175,000. That was refused by the state. The other one that hasn't been able to get any luck or any traction on is the Cherry Hill Wall project. The state has decided that is not an eligible project for them to fund, and that's why that has not been completed. We still, as far as I know, have still been pursuing that grant to get that money for that, repair that wall before it collapses, but I don't know where it stands at this point.
Yes, Kathleen.
I'm Kath Martin. I would like to speak in favor of actually having a public works director in the town as a town position. I believe that the advantage in the planning and instead of having sort of an ad hoc, complaints about certain roads and maybe they get attention this year and maybe not till next year. I would like to see the town have a planning system in place into the future about how the roads are going to be maintained, how the sidewalks are going to be maintained on a regular basis, so we're not always, running into potholes at the end of the winter, or that things get taken care of in a timely manner. So I would say that, at least from what I've heard from the select board in terms of how much money we're spending on contracted services versus what we would spend on a salaried position is close enough to being the same that I think the advantages of having someone who is always there to plan ahead, and I would strongly encourage hiring somebody who has that capability, that would be an advantage to the town, and that we would be spending money that would get us ahead of the curve, because maintenance on roads is just an ongoing problem, and somebody needs to plan ahead on it. Thank you.
And I think I just called you Kathleen for the second time tonight, Catherine.
Actually, it's Kathleen.
All right. Further discussion on the amendment to the amendment. Ms. Howard. Back here.
Just to clarify, it's my understanding that although we can propose a cut to the budget and give guidance to the select board, they're the ones who can make the final decision as to whether or not, as to where those funds would be cut. So the $100,000 could be cut, but they could still hire a public works director if they so desired. The other thing that I wanted to clarify is it's my understanding that if the budget is cut and Article 9 is passed, which is approximately $82,000, that those monies could never be cut from the budget, that they're also in the budget and they're a separate article, and you cannot cut those. So if you're going to cut the budget by $100,000, it would have to be somewhere else. So those funds are locked in if that article passes.
So,
Yeah, I just want to add that, another reason that we had many reasons for wanting to add this position, but also the state has put on a lot more, and Mike, I'm going to ask Mike in a second to speak to this in more detail because he's the expert on this, but we have at about a third of our roads that are in the state of either needing to be rehabilitated or reclaimed in the near future. And so that is going to take engineering services for the culverts, for the roads, and also to build, to meet these new standards that the Vermont state is putting on towns to meet the Clean Water Act. So I'm going to ask Mike, if you don't mind, to say a few words about that.
Mike Hines, Highway Supervisor. You all said it pretty well. I can only echo some of your comments, but there was a need in the 90s for this position because our roads were at a condition that they are now. I think they're worse. I presented to the board several months ago and to the manager. And there's a lot of, I think that during that time, there was a lot of money found by this person and there was a lot of paving done. not just paving, but actual road reconstruction. And that's what we need. You can pave anything you want, it's like a big old Band-Aid, but you're not fixing a problem, you're just you're not. And a lot of these roads need reconstructing so they will last. So this person found a lot of money to do this and minimal expense to the taxpayers. Now this position was eliminated. Unfortunately, budgets were leveled throughout the state, not just here, and all the paving fell by the wayside. We've got a couple of grants in between to do some small stuff, but no major work. I'm trying to take care of the good roads that we have. Believe it or not, it's cheaper to take care of the good roads than to try and repair these bad roads until a plan can be in place to do so. Now, Sue talked about the mandates for the Vermont Clean Water Act and hydrological road segments, which is all Greek to everybody, but it's a mandate by the state where we have to try and stop silt and organic debris and stuff like that from entering our waterways. And pretty near every street in Bellows Falls and Saxons River empties into the waterways, and in some way, shape, or form, every ditch in the rural area. So that's going to involve the crushing part to make our own material. We did get a grant to do some of that this fall. We have 5 areas that were really bad. We would have got them done, but Lane ran out of the material because everybody now is trying to do it. So that's part of the reason why I like to crush up on out of the quarry. But yeah, I think we've missed out on a lot of money to get some of this work done. I think probably we're maybe in a little worse shape than what we were when we hired him to begin with. It's the best I can tell you.
I see hands in the back row. I see Rosemary and I see Mr. Payne.
Guy Payne from Saxons River in Rockingham. Just a question in terms of the scope of responsibilities for the public service portion. Is it just roads, or are we also looking for this individual to handle the buildings of Rockingham as a facility manager?
The idea is, right now, this position would be carried in the highway department. But right now, in the highway department, we also have an individual who does help with maintenance throughout the town buildings. I would anticipate that this person would be doing work of that nature as well, particularly on an engineering scale.
Yeah.
Obviously not banging nails, but helping to look at the infrastructure of different buildings and plan that out.
So who do we have now who looks after, who would be considered a facility manager for the town and village buildings?
One of the personnel at the highway department is also a equipment and truck driver. He's most of his time these days is spent on maintenance of buildings. We're not keeping up with what we need to be doing. It's just very difficult based upon the staffing levels that we have. It's very tough.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Roth.
Thank you. No, I just want to clarify one thing. This person in his new position, her position, would they not only identify the needs, but would they also be able to apply for the grants? Or does that have to come through another department again? So if this person can identify and bring the money in to take care of it, it's a win-win situation.
Yes, they would be doing both, identifying, and having someone in that position who is aware of the various patterns of grants and what grants are available. They know by planning ahead of what the town needs to do, they can plan ahead when to apply for those grants as well and when they would get them. So they would be doing both. That's the anticipation.
And just to step aside for a minute, I would like to thank Mike Hines for all that he has done this winter with the roads and the potholes and everything. I live on the Rockingham 500. That's Rockingham Hill Road, where everybody goes 60 miles an hour. And we are Pothole Hill. And thanks to Mike, I think we've been able to get up and down that dirt road. I don't know what's going to happen with the macadam this year, but I do want to say an attaboy to Mike. Thank you so very much.
Any further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Ms. Wright.
Just to be honest, you did initially put this position in expecting the village to pay half of it. We refused at this point to say yes to that. We are just beginning our budget talks on that. However, things like page 33, where sidewalks last year were allocated $259,000, but you only spent $6,000. That seems poor planning from that perspective, looking at that. $6,000 out of $259,000 allocated for those sorts of things. That's just one space. As the next page, 35, you have asphalt and gravel crushing. Nothing budgeted 2017, 2018, and nothing spent 2017. I'm not sure if you spent anything in 2018, according to this document. So those are issues that Susan brought up that were not addressed properly in the previous fiscal year. And lastly is the delinquencies of $173,000, 622 on page 47 of people with delinquent tax reports. Some of these are multiple tax years. They have not been properly collected. Perhaps more effort should be made, and that kind of money would take care of the problem with the budget.
If I could respond to the piece on the sidewalks, that it's part and parcel of the discussion about the Public Works Director. We're not able to get... Sorry? No, I'm sorry about that. Given the existing structure that we have, we're just not able to get to some of those projects. There's so many other things that are going on. One of the things we did do with that money unspent is we did carry it forward into this fiscal year. And the plan is to use that in several different locations. So we did that in several instances with paving, with road paving, sidewalk work, and some other capital expenditures. Any unspent money we carried forward into this year to use for those projects and be able to actually get a better bang for the buck by virtue of having more funding available.
Further discussion on the amendment to the amendment. So, yes, back row.
I have a comment, Mr. Moderator.
After we get him a mic, we'll come back to you, Gaetano.
Hello, I'm here. Okay, hi, I'm Wayne Blanchard. In terms of the usefulness of a person that we've been talking about to do this, it's been a number of years, but so I can't tell you exactly when, but I know at the time Parker Hill Road was rebuilt. It was rebuilt over a period of several years, and it was kind of rebuilt from the ground up. In other words, it wasn't just a layer of pavement, the whole thing was rebuilt. And a lot of that work was done, if I understand right, was done with our own road maintenance people under the direction of somebody who, an engineer who could design the whole thing. And I'm aware at that time, well, first of all, there's a huge contrast I just want to point out. If you ever drive over Parker Hill Road right now, the existing road was rebuilt and it's being maintained. When you get to the Springfield side of it, they put a layer of pavement on it, and it's all broken up already. I mean, it's fallen apart. So to me, it's money well spent to do it right the first time rather than just kind of patchwork kind of things. The other benefit of that, having somebody there who knew how to do it and was able to do it really, I guess, inexpensively, because they were also able to do the section of O'Brien Road that is paved, and I never expected to see that done in my lifetime. And I'm aware that there were select board members at that time who were opposed to doing the work. In my mind, it saves us as taxpayers money, just wear and tear on our cars, to have the roads rebuilt correctly the first time and have them maintained rather than let it all fall apart. So I'm hoping we defeat these two amendments and pass the budget.
Gaetano?
Yes, just the $6,000 sidewalk number, spent 3 times the amount on the little section of Oak Street project. I'm not sure Is that number accurate? And in reference to this position, we discussed it quite a bit, and to hear Mr. Hines say, and the manager state how we're kind of pulling someone from somewhere else who we're already paying to do projects that this person could be doing, but I believe that we'll get back, like many people have said. I wasn't in favor of more staff till I understood the benefits we could get from this position. And if it's removed, you'll be level funded, but I think we put funds in place to do projects, and I think this position can guide those projects, and I believe get quite a bit more funding for future projects. If there's one thing we need, as has already been said many times, the roads and sidewalks are in horrible condition here.
So, Shane?
One of the things mentioned in the handout that I've provided is that this next budget year is the first of a 5-year period in which we would be increasing the amount of paving by $50,000 each year so that we can get caught up to where we really need to be. I mean, if you look at what has been spent over the years in comparison to some other communities, it's been sorely lacking. So in order to go forward with this plan, we will need someone on board to really move it forward. And then it's not just paving of roads. We're also looking at $10,000 per year for sidewalks over the next 5 years as well. Again, trying to get caught up where we really need to be, because the sidewalks are in Bellows Falls and in Saxons River are woefully inadequate.
Further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Are you ready for the question? And procedurally, we are now voting on a motion by Mr. Barnett to amend the motion by Mr. Falzo. The original amendment was to reduce the budget by $300,000. The amendment is to reduce it by $100,000. If you adopt the amendment to the amendment, that then becomes the main amendment. So if you vote to reduce it by $100,000, Mr. Falzo's motion then becomes to reduce it by $100,000. We will then vote on that motion to the amendment to the main motion. So it's a two-step process. If you defeat this motion for $100,000, we then vote on the $300,000. Depending on the outcome of that, it'll affect the voting on the main motion. Have I confused you thoroughly yet? All right. Are you ready for the question? There has been a motion made to amend the amendment to the main motion. The main motion was to raise and appropriate $5,413,141 with $4,487,846 to be raised by taxes. The amendment would reduce those figures by $100,000. All in favor of the amendment to reduce the budget by $100,000, say aye. All opposed? No. The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it, and you have defeated the secondary amendment. We'll now turn to the amendment to the main motion. Budget number, which I just gave you, $5,413,141, with $4,487,846 to be raised by taxes, to reduce that by $300,000. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it, and you have defeated the amendment to the main motion. We will now take up the main motion, which I will restate. Shall the voters of the town of Rockingham raise and appropriate the sum of $5,413,141 to pay the indebtedness of the town, repair and maintenance of highways, and pay all other general and regular expenses of the town beginning July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2019, with $4,846 to be raised by taxes. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. No. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 7. Article 8, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham raise and appropriate the sum of $412,352 in operating expenses for the support of the Rockingham Free Public Library, $357,300 to be raised by taxes. Mr. Pudignato?
Mr. Moderator, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham raise and appropriate the sum of $412,352 in operating expenses for the support of the Rockingham Free Public Library, $357,300 to be raised by taxes.
Do we have a second? All right. Discussion. Are you ready for the vote? Oh, sorry, right here in the middle.
Point of information, if you would, where does the amount not raised by taxes come from? Everybody else knows.
Do we have a library trustee here? Mr. Bohannon, Chair of the Rockingham Free Public Library Board of Trustees.
I'm John Bohannon. The balance comes from grants and from fundraising through various activities of the library itself and Friends of the Library. And we've raised that amount this year in order to keep the budget where it is.
Any further discussion on the article for the library? Are you ready for the vote? It has been moved and seconded to have the voters of the town of Rockingham raise and appropriate the sum of $412,352 in operating expenses for the support of the Rockingham Free Public Library, $357,300 to be raised by taxes. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 8. Article 9, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham raise and appropriate the sum of $82,053 to be allocated to the following social service agencies as indicated. And I will read each agency and the amount to be allocated for each one of those. Bellas Falls Senior Center, $21,384. Green Mountain RSVP and Volunteer Center, $1,450. Healthcare and Rehabilitation Services, Inc., $2,700. Meeting Waters YMCA, $5,000. Our Place, $5,000. Parks Place, $4,000. Southern Vermont Community Action, SEVCA, $4,770. Southeast Vermont Transit, Inc., The Current, $3,825. Springfield Supported Housing Program, $2,500. Vermont Adult Learning, $1,350. Visiting Nurse Alliance of Vermont and New Hampshire, $26,024. Women's Freedom Center, $1,750. Youth Services, $2,300. Mr. Golick.
Mr. Moderator, I move shall the voters of the town of Rockingham raise and appropriate the sum of $82,053 to be allocated to the following social service agencies as indicated. Bellas Falls Senior Center, $21,384. Green Mountain RSVP and Volunteer Center, $1,450. Healthcare and Rehabilitation Services, Inc., $2,700. Meeting Waters YMCA, $5,000. Our Place, $5,000. Parks Place, $4,000. Southeastern Vermont Community Action, $4,770. Southeast Vermont Transit, Inc., The Current, $3,825. Springfield Supported Housing Program, $2,500. Vermont Adult Learning, $1,350. Visiting Nurse Alliance of Vermont and New Hampshire, $26,024. Women's Freedom Center, $1,750. Youth Services, $2,300.
Do we have a second? All right, discussion. Ms. Wright.
Walter Kiesek. I'd like to reduce...
Walter,
Yes.
I didn't recognize you. I recognized Ms. Wright. I'll get to you next. I'll get to you next. First time we've heard from you tonight. Didn't know you were here. So we'll come back.
My only question is, on page 26, how do you have an overage? How do you run over on social service agencies? Look at page 26. On the second line of service agencies, for the fiscal year ending 2017, the 2017 actual year, it is for the BF Senior Center requested 21,384, actual was 23,106. I'm just asking, how do you overpay when they ask for a certain dollar figure?
I can't answer that question without looking further into it, and I'd be happy to do that, and I don't know why that is.
I guess we don't have a definitive answer for you, Deb. So now, Mr. Kiesig.
Okay, I'd like to reduce this by $3,825, which is the amount that Southeast Vermont Transit Inc. is requesting, and that would bring that total amount down to $78,228. And I can speak forward if you so desire.
All right, and so the motion has been made and seconded to reduce the allocation under Article 9 of $82,053 by the sum of $3,825, which is the identical amount listed in the item for Southeast Vermont Transit Inc., the current. Mr. Kiesig.
Okay, for the purpose so that everybody understands where I'm coming from, this organization just wasted somewhere in the vicinity of $1 million putting in a fuel dispersal system for their buses up there when they're sitting directly across the road from a filling station. The ruse that they provided was that they were going to save money. At this point, I know there's several $100,000 into the project, and it's still not up and running, and there was never any discussion on the expense side of it, which is the buying and trucking of the fuel that they're going to be needing, the maintenance of the facility, the extra insurance that they're going to have to provide, the protocols they're going to have to put in place because they're going to be using a flammable, hazardous material, extra electricity for the operation of the facility. If they're wasting that kind of our tax dollars, you can only imagine what else they're doing.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Yes, Mr. Brissett. Oh, John, I'll come back.
Just, can we pick a line like that on this particular article?
Joe, I'm not sure. I've got to give that some thought. Yeah, point of order, John. I'll come back.
Go to the mic. I believe it was stated when we passed the overall budget that each line item was locked in. I believe you yourself said that.
I wanted to ask Walter to restate his motion, but the article itself only outlines how we got to the $82,053. So the select board, this is an article that was put in here at the direction of the select board, I believe. No? Were these petitioned? Were they petitioned? So,
At this point, they didn't have to petition. This is,
Okay.
the ones that have to petition, were petitioned are the following two.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And so these are organizations that have previously been voted funds, and I can't tell you how often they have to renew their petition, but the select board, this is a select board article, so within that $82,053, they can disperse that within their discretion. So you can make the recommendation, it may or may not be applied to that particular item for the transit, or the current. They could apply that across the board proportionally. They can choose to accept your recommendation. So to answer your question, John, is no, you can't direct the reduction to a particular agency. You can only reduce the amount of the article. And Joe, was that part of what you were asking or no?
Mr. Moderator, I would ask, would we be able to survey the board now to see if they'd be willing to abide by the intent of the motion that Mr. Kiesig just made, specifying a particular entity? Could we ask the board that they were willing to abide by that intent?
Use your mic. Mr.
The intent of the motion is in a particular entity in that group, and the request I'm making is if the moderator would be willing to survey you guys, if you would be willing to abide by the intent of that motion, because if you aren't going to be able to abide by it now, there's no way I could vote against, or vote for this amendment. But if you're willing to agree to what has been specified, then I would be willing to consider it.
So is the board clear on what Mr. Brissett's asking?
Yeah.
He's looking for a sentiment across the board from, will you apply the reduction to that particular agency?
I think I would first have to look at the law on this in more detail, because I'm hearing there might be a case in Burlington, I believe.
There's a Vermont Supreme Court case out of South Burlington where the community voted for a particular allocation for a social service agency and tried to renege on that. And I think the court declared that that was actually kind of a contract between once that was approved. So I'm not sure if I'm not sure if it was specific to that one or a bunch like this, an aggregation of them. So there is a case on that.
I'm not here to render a legal opinion on the Supreme Court's decision, but I'm familiar with the case. The circumstances are a little bit different. It had been allocated and then they didn't expend it. But I think the question here is, given what you've heard, based on Walter's representations, would you be willing to apply that cut to that particular agency? You're not obligated to answer, but you're certainly welcome to.
I was on that board for a number of years, and I agree with what Walter is saying. I'm not sure if it's legal or not, but it's just my intent. But they also give us money in lieu of taxes. I'm not sure exactly what that is. Do you remember? I don't think they have to give it to us, but that's something they choose, so I don't know. They could stop paying us that amount of money. But I thank Walter for bringing that up. Mr. Kiesig, I know.
Mr. Wright?
If I understand this correctly, Joe, what you're asking is basically to poll us for our individual opinions. That, as I understand it, would just amount to basically a surmise of our opinion. It wouldn't lock us into a directive of any kind.
Correct.
Is that correct?
But that's what he's asking. We're not asking for a decision. We're asking for your opinion.
All right. Further discussion on the amendment to reduce the appropriation under Article 9 by $3,825. Yes, Ms. Martin.
I would like to ask the Select Board, in this particular case, we're being asked to amend an appropriation which you have all approved as an, oh, sorry. Is this any better? Okay, I got to talk to it. All right. Oh, I'm sorry about that. So I would like to ask the Select Board if, since they have approved this $83,000 as as an article, if they have looked into the finances and other questions about the current, we're hearing an allegation that there's been serious mismanagement there, or at least that appears to be the opinion of some people. And what I'd like to know is if you did consider that when you decided that you'd like to allocate $3,000 to them. I'm totally in favor of the town supporting a public transportation system. And if there are problems with the way it's being managed or the problems with the way it's using money, it looks like the $3,200 is a very small amount of the budget that they're talking about. And they do provide a huge amount of service to us. So if we're going to deny them what you have all suggested we not deny them, I'd like to hear from you if you've looked into this and if you think that there's some problems there or not.
We did have some discussion, particularly with the current, and when that project came up, I think it actually hit the select board for a different reason, if I remember now.
Yeah, the town actually is half owner of that property, and in order to do the filling station there, they did need approval for permitting as co-owner for that project. There was a lengthy discussion on it, and in the end, it was decided that the board, correct me if I'm wrong, the board did support it, and we did sign off on the permitting on that.
But we also, when we look at these numbers, we're looking at what are they providing services to residents of our town. And we were concerned when they lost the, I think it was the Medicaid contract, but then we found they're still providing busing, for instance, to like certain community members. So we really wanted to make sure that that money was money that was intended to be used to help residents of the town, and I think 32, they do that with that amount of money, so that's why we left it in. If I can speak for the board, I don't mean to, but.
Further questions? Yes, we have a hand in the back. Oh, right here, Pat.
Yeah, I think years ago that money was supposed to be for local services for transit, and that was our contribution, and that's why we're keeping our transit service here.
I think I saw a hand in the back corner.
I know that you're all hoping to come back after tomorrow night, but we can ask all of you how you feel, but a lot of things may change by tomorrow night. So whether you agree or don't agree to do this, everybody remember, some of this may all change. And the new people coming, if there are new people by tomorrow night, they may have a whole different idea. So just, and it's wonderful to keep asking them over and over what they think and how they're going to agree with this. But if they're not there, it isn't going to do any good to keep beating a dead horse.
Further discussion on the amendment to the main motion. Mr. Brissett.
Yeah, thanks, and I thank the board for giving us, your opinion, but based on your opinion, which is there's a question of whether or not it's even legal to do so, while I appreciate what Mr. Kiesik's bringing up at the meeting, I get the gist, and I don't want to risk having to reduce any of the other agencies, so I would basically not support his amendment because of that. Thank you.
Mr. Barnett? And we'll find you a microphone with batteries.
Oh, Mike's got it. He's right behind you.
Thank you. A couple of points. I think the board is on solid ground if they want to reduce the budget by that amount for that agency. These agencies petitioned the board, and every 5 years, it's the policy of the board that they have to be revoted. That is what this is. You're revoting that article. So I think that's sound ground that it can be carved out if the board so chooses. I believe the issue that Mr. O'Keefe is talking about is a situation where the board or the townspeople voted in favor of an article, and then the board reneged on that favor. So that's vastly different than what we're talking about. Thirdly, just to speak, and I'm not speaking for or against this amendment, but I will talk a little bit about the current and specifically the project that Walter is talking about. I was on the board at that time. The current came to us with this proposal to install a fuel depot there. I think initially the board was not in favor. I know I wasn't, and I never was in favor of it for a number of reasons. One, up until now, fuel was being bought locally, which meant a lot of federal tax dollars were being spent locally at area businesses. Not only were they buying fuel locally, but when the bus drivers pulled in, they were probably going in and buying a coffee or a candy bar or something. So I was concerned that money was going to be taken out of the local area. Second was, it's partially town property. And what we have learned over the years that in-ground fuel tanks are generally not a good thing. And my position was I was really never in favor of doing this, and I know a couple of the board members did, and I think this really stems from the fact that the current had nearly a $750,000 grant that they needed to spend, and this is where they decided to spend it.
Further, Mr. Falzo. Hang on, Joe. Hang on, Scott. Microphone's coming.
Didn't the town not too long ago pay the insurance on that building? Are we still presently paying the insurance? I know not too long ago it was like $7,500.
We also made a substantial, well, we did make a substantial investment with, I believe, intermodal funds, if I'm correct, Ann, in reference to the park and ride that we have there.
No, I don't believe that, no, we don't pay the insurance on that building. That's squarely in their realm.
We did at one time though.
Okay.
And don't we maintain that park and ride parking lot, the town?
We do we do pay for the electricity of the park and ride.
That isn't enough?
I think it's in some ways a separate issue. This is in support of their providing
Correct.
bus service to the community, and you know, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah. I know this is a little off the beaten path, but a little bit ago we were talking about roads and sidewalks. If I had my way, I'd zero them all out, because when times are good, you give it away. When they're not good, you don't give it away. But I know it won't pass here tonight, so I'm not even going to bother. But I would encourage the board in years to come to consider some of these services. A lot of them are good services. They provide for the youth, the elderly, but it comes to a point where we can't afford it. Everybody was talking about roads earlier. There's a bunch of people in here who live on Grizzle Drive. It's called Lose Your Liver Lane because it is rough. And I'm telling you, it was in the paper not too long ago. They're going to rebuild it in 2030. I'll need 2 kidneys by then. It's not going to hold up. But I would, off the beaten path, thank you.
We'll give you a little leeway, Scott. Any further discussion on the amendment to reduce the Article 9 by $3,825?
Just on their behalf, I want to remind you that they do provide service to our veterans to go up to White River Junction. And there are many of them that cannot afford or do not have a car or do not have anyone that can be responsible to take them up there. But the current does take them up and brings them back, unless that has changed this year. Because I know there was an occasion when I was not here and they took my husband to the VA. And I'm grateful for that.
So did they bring him back, Rosemary?
Ray, this is not your night.
I'm sure Hans came back safe and sound. Any further discussion on the amendment? Yes, Walter.
Okay, a little bit of history here for those that don't remember. Us taxpayers spent several $1,000s probably almost $100,000 getting that property ready so that this organization could have a place to come. I don't think they're treating us very well, wasting federal tax money, you know, and a lot of times I see these buses running around empty and they're in places where there ain't nobody living, so I don't think they're operating very judiciously, I guess.
All right, I think we've about exhausted the discussion on the motion to reduce the article by $3,825. Are we ready for the vote on the motion to amend? All right, it's been moved and seconded to reduce Article 9 by the amount of $3,825 with a recommendation that it be directly applied to the allocation to Southeast Vermont Transit, Inc., also known as the Current. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no.
No.
The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it, and you have defeated the amendment. We'll now take up the main motion. It has been moved and seconded to have the voters of the town of Rockingham raise and appropriate the sum of $82,053 to be allocated to the following social services agencies as indicated. And protocol requires that I read them again. Bellas Falls Senior Center, 21,384. Green Mountain RSVP, 1,450. HCRS, 2,700. The YMCA, 5,000. Our Place, 5,000. Parks Place, 4,000. Sevka, 4,770. The Current, 3,825. Springfield Supported Housing, 2,500. Vermont Adult Learning, 1,350. VNA, 26,024. Winneman's Freedom Center, 1,750. Youth Services, $2,300. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 9. Article 10. Shall the town of Rockingham vote to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum of $4,000 for the support of Greater Falls Connection to provide services to residents of the town? Mr. Bernardo.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town of Rockingham vote to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum of $4,000 for the support of Greater Falls Connection to provide services to residents of the town.
Do we have a second? Discussion? Oh, way in the back corner. Mr. Ferget. Or not? No, Mr. Empey. We'll get you a microphone. Let's get you a microphone.
Mike Empey, Recircle. Mr. Moderator, is it possible that we can make a motion as a point of order to combine the next two articles so we can move the night along? Because we're not cutting anything and we're arguing over piddly amounts.
We have to vote on them as warned, Mike, so we'll try to get through them quickly, but we need to take them up one at a time. Any further discussion or questions on Article 10? Yes.
Hi, I'm Don Tretler. I'm a member of the advisory board for Greater Falls Connections. And in case people aren't aware of what they do, they promote wellness and prevent alcohol, tobacco, and other substance abuse among youth here in the Bellas Falls community. Let's see, some of the programs and campaigns they've done, maybe you've seen some of these signs here. I will be a parent, not a best friend forever. Lock your meds, 802 quits, counterbalance. There's a group, they run a group above the influence, a youth group. We do an active parenting and nurturing parenting classes. They do a lot of stuff out here in the community. And a lot of their work is driven by what they call a youth risk behavior survey, which comes out in all different communities. It kind of gauges among youth, where they stand with different abuses, different attitudes about substance abuse. And we've seen a decline in the use of alcohol by Bellas Falls Union High School students since 2009. Not necessarily that Greater Falls Connections has taken all the credit for that. Parents here, I'm sure, are a big part of that as well. There's also been a meaningful decrease in the number of Bellows Falls youth misusing prescription drugs. For the last 2 summers, they've sent youth to the Youth International 4-Day Conference in Rhode Island. So they've done a lot of good work here in the community. I've been a board member for the last 2 years. I was on the initial board when they started up 10 years ago. And I think we should do this, folks.
Any further discussion on Article 10? Yes. Chief Lake.
Ron Lake, Chief of Police, Village of Bellows Falls. Greater Falls Connections is probably one of the best things that's ever happened to the Village of Bellows Falls. We have some of our youth right here, right now. The programs they offer our children are immeasurable. This is a good program. They're only asking for $4,000. I don't think it's going to hurt us a bit. Thank you.
Any further discussion on Article 10? Ready for the question? It has been moved and seconded to have the town of Rockingham vote to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum of $4,000 for the support of Greater Falls Connection to provide services to residents of the town. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 10. Article 11. Shall the town of Rockingham vote to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum of $2,500 for the support of the Bellows Falls Community Bike Project to provide services to residents of the town? Mr. Wright.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town of Rockingham vote to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum of $2,500 for the support of the Bellows Falls Community Bike Project to provide services to residents of the town.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion? You ready for the vote? Oh. All right, Mr. Chief Lake.
I don't know if anybody's ever noticed, but our kids running around on bicycles is a very good thing. I put the helmets on them. I offer them from my office. I just soon see the kids at the bike project than I would see them anywhere else in an unsavory neighborhood or an unsavory environment. Fixing bicycles and riding them is a very good thing, and I support this. Thank you.
Any further discussion on Article 11? Are you ready for the vote? And it has been moved and seconded to have the town of Rockingham vote to appraise and expend the sum of $2,500 for the support of the Bellows Falls Community Bike Project to provide services to residents of the town. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 11. Article 12. Shall the voters of the town of Rockingham establish, pursuant to 24 VSA Section 2804A, a reserve fund to be named the Town of Rockingham Highway Improvement Capital Reserve Fund, the purpose of which is to support the ongoing repair, upkeep, maintenance, and improvements to town highways. Such fund may receive income either through appropriation at an annual or special town meeting, through grants, gifts, or donations from any source, and through accrued interest. Furthermore, to appropriate $50,000 to this reserve fund, such funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance. Ms. Hammond.
Mr. Moderator, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham establish pursuant to 24 VSA 2804A a reserve fund to be named Town of Rockingham Highway Improvement Capital Reserve Fund, the purpose of which is to support the ongoing repair, upkeep, maintenance, and improvements of town highways. Such funds may receive income either through an appropriation at the annual or special town meeting, through grants, gifts, or donations from any source, and through accrued interest. Furthermore, to appropriate $50,000 to this reserve fund, such funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance.
Do we have a second? All right, discussion. Mr. Brissett.
Yeah, thanks. It was brought up before that there was a budget like $240,000 to, fix sidewalks, and it wasn't spent because you didn't get, it was explained briefly that you get to those projects. So I was just wondering if you could clarify a little bit more, specifically why, if you had the money to fix stuff, you didn't get to it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to have Shane respond to that.
Yeah, in the budget, we do have some funds for expenditures, but they were balanced off on the revenue side by grant funds, which we did not receive. In fact, some of that money is for Cherry Hill, where we had budgeted $225,000. We looked to receive $175,000. That didn't happen. And in fact, the $50,000 gap, that money that was raised through taxes is some of that money that has been brought forward into this fiscal year here. And hopefully we can get that funding this next year.
So there wasn't $200,000 put aside to fix sidewalks. That was incorrect, that was stated before?
We increased the budget from 20 to I think 50,000 this past year, and then on top of that, money that was not spent last year, I think it was $82,000 is being brought forward into this year. Not sure what you want to add.
No, just that it was, when we do the budget, that was what we anticipated to spend, but we also anticipated to get $175,000 in that grant, which we didn't receive. So that's where that comes from.
Further discussion on Article 12.
Again, this is money that comes from unrestricted fund balance that's already on hand. And the idea being that we would hope to put money aside every year so that there's less impact on taxes over time when you're putting the same amount in every single year.
Are you ready for the question? Article 12. Shall the voters of the town of Rockingham establish pursuant to 24 VSA 2804A a reserve fund to be named the Town of Rockingham Highway Improvement Capital Reserve Fund, the purpose of which is to support the ongoing repair, upkeep, maintenance, and improvements of town highways. Such fund may receive income either through an appropriation at an annual or special town meeting, through grants, gifts, or donations from any source, and through accrued interest. Furthermore, to appropriate $50,000 to this reserve fund, such funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 12. Article 13. Shall the voters of the town of Rockingham establish pursuant to 24 VSA 2804A a reserve fund to be named the Rockingham Meeting House Capital Reserve Fund, the purpose of which is to support the ongoing repair, upkeep, maintenance, and improvement of the Rockingham Meeting House. Such fund may receive income either through an appropriation at an annual or special town meeting, through grants, gifts, or donations from any source, and through accrued interest. Furthermore, to appropriate $20,000 to this reserve fund, such funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance. Mr. Golick?
Mr. Moderator, I move shall the voters of the town of Rockingham establish pursuant to 24 VSA 2804, Section A reserve fund to be named the Rockingham Meeting House Capital Reserve Fund, for the purpose of which is to support the ongoing repair, upkeep, maintenance, and improvement of the Rockingham Meeting House. Such fund may receive income either through an appropriation at an annual or special town meeting, through grants, gifts, or donations from any source, and through accrued interest. Furthermore, to appropriate $20,000 to this reserve fund, such funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance.
Do we have a second? All right. Ms. Roth, would you care to speak on the Meeting House article? All right, hang on. Rosemary, let's give you a microphone.
How many of you here have been to the Rockingham Meeting House recently? The Rockingham Meeting House was built in 1787, has a wonderful history. We weren't even part of the United States. We were an independent country when we built that in 1787. We didn't become a state until 1791. When that was built, it was built by the people that lived in probably one of the largest towns in all of Vermont, the town of Rockingham. It is there today as a national landmark. Pretty important. We are a national landmark in our small town. Very few people know about that because up until recently, there wasn't even a website about it. I'm grateful to say that we will have a new director this year. We have a new development director, Gary Fox, which I hope that he will work with us. We also have a new director of the Meeting House, and that is Susan Ring. I don't know if Susan's here yet. I haven't had a chance to meet her. However, we have wonderful plans, and we did a lot last year. We did a lot to the Meeting House last year. For the first time, Mr. Corrigan, who is in the antique business, donated a beautiful case to the Meeting House where we found the antiquities. A lot of antiquities that have been left behind, and they are now in the case, and they're for you to come by and see. An old Bible, a chalice, some of the pewter plates. Do come by and take a look at it. We also had a number of improvements done because in the very front, if you were here in 1787 and you waited for your bride to come down and be married, you would turn around and look at her coming down the middle of the building, and you would turn your heel. And as you did that, it made an indentation that went lower and lower and lower and lower until now, when we have weddings, sometimes people would fall over it. So that was repaired last year. A number of other repairs took place, including the first time in years that the cemetery fence was repaired and painted. Now, that's one of my questions, and I'm going to let Stephen then take over from here, but I'm curious, in your budget, you have allowed us only $2,000 this year. Well, the budget is for $2,000 for maintenance. And when the cemetery was repaired last year, I believe that came out of the cemetery fund, not our fund. That came out of Mr. Fenton's fund, and it was his group that put it back together, while they were there. So we are very concerned about what's going to happen at the Meeting House. We know that there has been a recent study done, and maybe Mr. Fox will talk about that. But I also want to tell you that a group of us last year was so concerned that we got together and we raised quite a bit of money on our own, which is still sitting in a bank account, because we don't know how you're going to use it. So we also have access to a rather large grant, which I think is large, $5,000. But again, that has to be resolved this coming summer. I'm going to turn the mic over to Stephen Corrigan now and let him tell you a little bit more about your big treat here in Bellows Falls, something that could bring in dollars if people knew about it, that people would come to see it if there was a sign on Route 91, as there is for all of the other national landmarks in the state, that people would come by and they would support our restaurants, our bookstores, our coffee shops, and all of the other things, because you see, when they come and they say to us, where should we go to eat? We send them down to Bellows Falls. Where should we find something new? Go down and look at the Wyndham Antique Center. You're going to find something there that you never saw before. And we refer all of those people there or to the Vermont Country Store. So with that, I'd like to introduce Stephen and let him take it from here.
Rosemarie, would you like me to recognize your guest?
My guest?
Your guest. Yes. So, or would you? I can turn the podium over to you. So, all right. With the consent of the assembly, we will. I believe he's a non-resident.
No, he's a resident.
No, I'm a resident.
You're a resident.
I live 2 houses away from the Meeting House.
Even better.
Been here for 34 years, so not exactly new. We, as Rosemary and Charlie and a few other people, have been very concerned about what's been going on at the Meeting House. And as Rosemary said, we did do an awful lot this year, but we couldn't seem before that to get any coordination as to taking care of the Meeting House, and there's a lot of things that need to be done. Some immediate, some in the long range. And I noticed that your budget last year for maintenance was $6,000 and they spent $9,000. And this year, they've dropped the maintenance budget down to $2,000 and $5,000 for the next year. $2,000 is not going to take care of maintaining the Meeting House in any sense of the word. And this new proposal for the $20,000 for contingency will help. There's a major amount of plaster work that has to be done. Some of it very visual and immediate, some of them in the long term. There's lots of smaller projects. We have people that want to volunteer to help to do some of these things. The town has been a little bit negative about getting volunteers. We don't seem to have anyone that is coordinating any projects here. Shane was very nice and came up this summer and looked at some of the projects we had done. Really, Rosemary has been coordinating getting anything going. Once we got the issues talked about, we've been getting some work done. But $2,000 is not enough to take care of the immediate maintenance on it. The $20,000 would be, my understanding, that would be covering more of an emergencies or something that is going to have to be done on the long term, but just on short-term, everyday maintenance, $2,000 isn't going to cover it, $5,000 isn't going to cover it, $6,000 didn't cover it last year.
Shane? If I might, yeah, we are increasing it, as you say, from 2,000, which this existing year proposed to be 5,000. And really, the reason for the capital reserve fund is, as we have discussed in the past, is that there are many people who would like to make donations to the meeting house, dedicated to the meeting house. And right now, if we take in donations, those go into the general fund simply as revenue. We can't sequester that money specifically for projects. By establishing this capital reserve fund after July 1st, if it were to pass, any donations can go directly into this fund and therefore be earmarked. So that even if the $20,000 is approved, any additional funds coming in is dedicated to the Rockingham Meeting House. And furthermore, the money that's being proposed here at this time, $20,000, is not necessarily a contingency fund. It's a way to, as I indicated before with the highways, is a way to, on a consistent basis, put money away so that as projects are needed, specifically something along the lines of the plaster work, we'll have money set aside to do that work. So.
Yes, Rosemary, I recognize you for one brief question.
So we do get money. Where does that money go? Does that go into our now $20,000 fund? Or is that going to go back into the general budget? Or what's going to happen to the money that we raise and that we bring about through the donations at the meeting house?
Ryan? Oh, yes. Gary Fox?
Yeah, hi, Gary Fox, Development Director. And the Town of Rockingham has a CLG Commission, which is responsible for historic preservation, and in this past year applied for and received some grants to assess the condition of the meeting house, which identified $118,000 in work that needs to be done. The issue with, as Shane was describing, town can put about $5,000 per year to maintenance, and in order to do the plaster project, it can be phased over years, but $5,000 isn't enough to do any of the phases. What this reserve fund allows us to do is to plan the projects, accumulate enough funds in the reserve fund to complete the projects, and the let's see, the architectural historian that assessed the building this year is also has the potential, which again CLG Commission has the funds for this work, to provide a 30-year capital maintenance plan so that we can identify what funds are needed over 30 years, plan which aspects need to be done in 10 years, 20 years, and plan that reserve fund to allocate the money by year to get that work completed. The other thing about the meeting house is it's the oldest active meeting house in the state of Vermont. It's a national landmark with the Department of the Interior, and the town does allocate a lot of funds to this through the CLG Commission, hires docents like Rosemary each year to staff the facility 7 days a week for residents and visitors, for tourists. And there are a lot of donations accumulated there. One of the things that, if you look in our budget, how those funds are tracked and maintained from year to year is not really clear. And in working with our new finance director, Ron Kowalski, we've identified some line item accounts so that donations that come in that are generated by meeting house visits through tourists or generated through book sales. The COG Commission had printed cases of books on the history of the Rockingham Meeting House, and those are sold at the Meeting House. Those funds can be tracked and put towards the repairs also. So there is a long-term plan for repairing the Meeting House, getting it into shape, and being able to care for it. And we have hired, starting in January, a CLG coordinator, Susan Ray, who is here also. And feel free to, can you raise your hand, Susan? Feel free to talk to Susan after the meeting with any input
I
you
need to
have.
rein you in a little bit.
And I'm
I haven't heard any negative comments about supporting the Meeting House, so I'm going to call the question on my own as the moderator. Are you ready for the question?
Yes.
All in favor of Article... yeah, I am. I just remembered that. I just have to find it. Article 13, it's been a while. Shall the voters of the town of Rockingham establish, pursuant to 24 VSA, Section 2804A, a reserve fund to be named the Rockingham Meeting House Capital Reserve Fund, the purpose of which is to support the ongoing repair, upkeep, maintenance, and improvement of the Rockingham Meeting House. Such fund may receive income either through an appropriation at an annual or special town meeting, through grants, gifts, or donations from any source, and through accrued interest. Furthermore, to appropriate $20,000 to this reserve fund, such funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 13. Article 14, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham establish, pursuant to 24 VSA 2804A, a reserve fund to be named the Rockingham Town Hall Capital Reserve Fund, the purpose of which is to support the ongoing repair, upkeep, maintenance, and improvement of the Rockingham Town Hall, to include the Bellows Falls Opera House. Such fund may receive income either through an appropriation at an annual or special town meeting, through grants, gifts, or donations from any source, and through accrued interest. Furthermore, to appropriate $50,000 to this reserve fund, which funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance. Mr. Putinano.
Mr. Moderator, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham establish, pursuant to 24 VSA 2804A, a reserve fund to be named the Rockingham Town Hall Capital Reserve Fund, the purpose of which is to support the ongoing repair, upkeep, maintenance, and improvement of the Rockingham Town Hall, to include the Bellows Falls Opera House. Such fund may receive income either through an appropriations at an annual or special town meeting, through grants, gifts, or donations from any source, and through accrued interest. Furthermore, to appropriate $50,000 to this reserve fund, such funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion on the motion to approve $50,000 for the town hall. Mr. Barnett.
It seems like we've been going after the fund balance quite a bit tonight. Could you give us an understanding of like what's left in that and where we're at?
Very healthy fund balance.
In the handout that I provided, if you look at page 2, midway down the page, it says use of fund balances. Our uncommitted fund balance at the end, close of FY17 is $1.325 million. Yes, before tonight, back at June 30, at the end of the year, last year, $1,000,003, which constitutes 25.4% of the overall expenditures. The policy that was approved by both the Board of Trustees of the village as well as the Select Board was that we would, both the town and the village goal would be to have between 16 and 20% of expenditures in fund balance. We're well over that. So if all of the articles were to pass, in specific Articles 7, 12, 13, 14, and 15, after that, we would still have over 20%. In fact, we would have 20.7%. We would have in fund balance $1.08 million, over $1 million.
Did that answer your question? Okay. Any further discussion on Article 14? Ready for the question? Shall the voters of the town of Rockingham establish pursuant to 24 VSA 2804A a reserve fund to be named the Rockingham Town Hall Capital Reserve Fund, the purpose of which is to support the ongoing repair, upkeep, maintenance, and improvement of the Rockingham Town Hall, to include the Bellas Falls Opera House. Such fund may receive income either through an appropriation at an annual or special town meeting, through grants, gifts, or donations from any source, and through accrued interest. Furthermore, to appropriate $50,000 to this reserve fund, such funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 14. Article 15. Shall the voters of the town of Rockingham appropriate the sum of $25,000 as the municipal contribution for a grant to purchase a new pumper truck for the Bellas Falls Fire Department. Such funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance. Due to grant requirements, the truck is to be purchased, owned, housed, and maintained by the Bellas Falls Village Corporation. Mr. Wright.
Mr. Moderator, I move the voters of the town of Rockingham appropriate the sum of $25,000 as a municipal contribution for a grant to purchase a new pumper truck for the Bellas Falls Fire Department. Such funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance. Due to grant requirements, the truck is to be purchased, owned, housed, and maintained by the Bellas Falls Village Corporation.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion? So, yes. Chief McGinnis.
Sean McGinnis, Bellas Falls. There's a pretty good chance that we will not receive this grant. If we do not, I'd like to amend the motion, or amend the article so that the money goes into the Rockingham Fire Equipment General Fund, if that's possible.
State that specifically how you would like it to be voted on.
That if the village does not get the grant, that the $25,000 goes into the Rockingham Fire Equipment General Fund, which I believe has no money in it right now.
All right, let's get a second on that if we can. Do we have a second? All right. Sean, can you speak to that amendment, the purpose of that amendment?
Sorry about that. If we do not receive the grant, I'd just like to see that money put into the fire equipment fund for the town of Rockingham, since there is no money there. We, in Bellas Falls, I'll definitely go for this grant again next year. That way the money is there.
All right, I guess for the clarification of the moderator, is this $25,000 to come through by way of a grant to the town to then be expended on behalf of the village? Is that?
No, this is money coming from the fund balance.
Okay.
$25,000 would be going toward the town's or the matching contribution, 5% of this vehicle. So, and I think what you're talking about is a capital reserve fund, not a okay.
All right, so this is a contribution towards the purchase of the pumper that would be otherwise funded through a grant? Yes. Okay. So your request is to redirect that to the Rockingham Equipment Fund Reserve?
Only if the grant is not awarded.
Okay. Discussion on the amendment to the main motion. Mr. Barnett?
Can we clarify it's reserve fund, right?
Yes. All right. Any further discussion? Yes, Ron.
Ron Paradowski, Finance Director. Are we able to create a capital reserve fund that's not existing if it wasn't warning article?
There is one in existence, yeah. It's not presently funded in any significant way.
There is a capital reserve,
That's my understanding.
not an equipment fund.
No, not equipment fund. There's a specific capital reserve for fire, if I'm not I think so.
That would be
Check
good to,
the audit.
know.
Ron, you have the audit with you, don't you?
Further discussion on the amendment. All right, Madam Clerk, do you have a record of that motion? Or the amendment? Just want to make sure I'm perfectly clear.
Back here,
All right, Sean, see if I can restate this. Your motion is to amend the motion to appropriate the sum of $25,000 for the new pumper truck to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance. And your motion is to amend that if the Bellows Falls Fire Department does not get the grant to purchase the pumper truck, that the $25,000 be redirected to the town of Rockingham Fire Department Capital Reserve? Yes. Okay. All right. Do you have the amendment in mind? All right.
Back here, Ray.
Up, Denny Hardy.
Denny Hardy, Bells Falls. I'm just wondering, Sean, why we couldn't, if we don't get the grant, why we couldn't keep that into the reserve fund for another grant, another year's grant?
That's what we're talking.
Oh, earmarked for another grant. Okay.
All right, you ready for ready to vote on the amendment? All right. And I will restate that one more time. Motion is to amend Article 15, that if the grant for the pumper truck does not come through the village, that the $25,000 be reallocated or redirected to the capital reserve for the Rockingham Fire Department. Reserve, capital reserve?
I think
Vehicle
we have a
equipment
problem
reserve.
We can recall exactly what the correct terminology of that fund is.
Can we find it?
Yeah,
Computer.
probably the fire committee minutes or something. That may, it's right there. Yeah. Okay, so we just correct the wording on that then.
Yeah. All right. The word, it's a fire equipment fund is the name of the fund, we believe.
Is that correct, Ron?
Fire equipment reserve.
Thank you.
All right, with that clarification, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. The ayes appear to have it.
Yep.
The ayes do have it, and you have amended the main motion. We will now take up the main motion. As amended, shall the voters of the town of Rockingham appropriate the sum of $25,000 as the municipal contribution for a grant to purchase a new pumper truck for the Bellows Falls Fire Department, such funds to come from the town's unrestricted fund balance. Due to grant requirements, the truck is to be purchased, owned, housed, and maintained by the Bellows Falls Village Corporation. In the event that the grant is not obtained, that the funds be redirected to the, give me the proper name?
Fire Equipment Reserve.
Fire Equipment Reserve Fund. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted Article 15 as amended. Article 16. To transact any other business deemed proper when not involving the expenditure of town funds or any other business acted upon in the preceding articles. What is your pleasure under Article 16? Yes, Ms. Roberts.
Hi, I'm Camilla Roberts, Lister. I would like to make sure that it's registered properly in Shane's report about the Trans-Canada settlement, that the town has done extraordinarily well, and I'm sure you're all very well aware that this has been a long, repeated history of appeals that, by the way, cost a lot of money. And that we, with this settlement, we will not be spending more money and having to budget more money for something like 5 years hence. That's one expense that won't be showing up. And to boot, the team that worked on this managed to actually amazingly increase the value amount for the hydro above where it was last year for the reappraisal. I salute all of you who worked on it.
Camilla, do you mean the Great River?
Great River Hydro at this point, yes. New owners, thank you.
No problem.
And I hope we don't ever have to discuss this again for at least 5 years. That's amazing.
All right, Mr. Brissett.
Yeah, thanks. I'd just like to make a little trouble. I like to make a friendly request to the board that you pull the SEVIDS grant, our board's or town's contribution to the SEVIDS project out of the general budget and put it in a separate article next year so that we could just at least maybe examine it just a little. But thank you very much.
Yeah, pull the mic away from your mouth just a whisker. I couldn't understand that.
All right. Any other business under Article?
May I respond to that?
Oh, yes.
I couldn't.
Adam Grinold from BDCC, under which the SEVEDS is run, was here and available to talk about that during the budget. So he is fully prepared to discuss that if anyone were to bring it up.
Very bottom end.
And also, I mean, we also now are in a position that we have Gary Fox, who is able to, I mean, without somebody in that development director position, it was very difficult to take advantage of the opportunities that SEVIDS would provide us, that they say they will provide us. But I'm hopeful. I know Gary has his hands up, so maybe he has something to say about that.
Mr. Fox.
It will be or it's going to be.
So I just do want to say that in the few months that I've been in the job, I have seen benefits to the town way outweighing our $15,000 contribution. And just some quick examples. 3-sentence overview. The SEVIDS program started around the closing of the Vermont Yankee, and through that developed something called the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. And what that has allowed has been for BDCC to implement that strategy and get funds to do that. So how we see the benefit of that in Rockingham, one of the things when we're looking at our revenues and expenses that we don't talk about is ways of increasing the grand list. And an example with the Chroma project, that was over $25 million to build the facility and keep them in town and have the 25 new jobs increased. And the value increase on that building increases our tax base tremendously in one project. The way that the SEVEDS program helped is that they were able to purchase the facility. They did all the administrative work on it, and they were able to purchase the property so that the whole property could be eligible for the new market tax credits, which is a method of adding millions of dollars to that project without a cost to Chroma. So the amount it cost to build that facility would never give them a return that they needed to stay in town without tools like that. And it can seem like a lot of behind the scenes work that is not really recognizable, but just that one move added more than $15,000 a year to our grant list. A couple other things, the administration that they do on the grants. Federal funds come with a lot of strings attached to them. And if we had our finance and development office trying to do all of the compliance issues that go with the project at the Robertson Paper Company on the island, the Chroma project, it would be more hours than we have in the office just to comply with payment processing. So the capacity that the SEVEDS program has built at BDCC is doing all of the administration, payment requisitions. They did that at no charge to us on the Chroma project. They've instituted some programs that have allowed another major commercial property, the Vermont Graphics property, which has been pretty much abandoned. The economic development programs that have been implemented through SEVEDS have brought a couple of people through their startup program and provided the impetus for them to purchase that facility, and that is now going through the environmental process and will be renovated, again adding another high-value commercial property back to the grant list. So there's three discrete projects, each one generating more than that much benefit for the community.
Thank you, Gary. Joe, does that help? Good. Any other? Ms. Wright.
I'll make this quick. Thank you, Ray, for standing in tonight. You did a great job.
Thank you for not beating me up.
Yeah. I just want to say I didn't realize how much I expected to see Mike Hardy here tonight when I walked in. And I think everyone here probably feels the same. I realized how much I appreciated his service here, how much we'll miss him. And I just wanted us to think about that and thank you for your service. Ray.
Any other business under Article 16? In that case, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. So we are adjourned. Thank you, folks.